Today's lesson is on purchasing power. So I'm going to start down here. Remember the warm-up, complete independently before listening to this lesson, and then check your answers for the warm-up with my answers posted. So income and expenses. Dan is in grade 11 and works weekends and some evenings at a local cinema. He earns minimum wage of $14 per hour. So I'm going off of the minimum wage in Ontario at this moment, which is $14. He works an average of 25 hours per week. Dan lives with his parents and has no regular expenses. Calculate Dan's weekly gross income. So 14 times 25, so $14 an hour times 25 hours per week is equal to $350. If Dan takes home 95% of his gross earnings, determine Dan's approximate weekly net income run to the nearest dollar. So remember, net income is after all taxes have been deducted from your gross earnings. So your take home is your net income. So Dan's net income is 95% of his gross earning. So you're going to take your $350, multiply it by 0.95. So 350 times 95% in decimal form, which is equal to $333 approximately, because it says to round to the nearest dollar. Dan tends to spend about half of his net earnings on essential items. He saves about 1/4 of his net earnings so that he can buy a car. How many weeks will it take for him to save the $3,000? Okay. So he needs to save $3,000 and he saves 1/4 of his earnings. Okay. So we found out that his weekly earnings is $333. I'm going to times that by what 1/4 of that would be, which is 25%, and decimal form is 0.25. So 83.25 is his savings. This is how much he's saving for his car a week. So now to determine how long it's going to take him to get to $3,000, we're going to take 3,000 and we're going to divide it by how much he saves in a week. And this will determine how many weeks it will take for him to save the $3,000. And so that is equal to 36 weeks. So it'll take 36 weeks for Dan to save $3,000. Purchasing power is how able a person is to buy what they want when they want. Okay. So after all the expenses for essentials have been taken care of, you have money left over. That money left over we call purchasing power. That money is now, you can use it to your discretion, however you decide to use it. It's extra money. So you've paid your bills, you've paid all your taxes and rent and insurance. If there's anything left over from your pay stub, we call that purchasing power. That little bit of money left over, you can save, you can spend on something that you would like, that's not an essential need. So describe Dan's purchasing power. Okay, well, it says up here that he half of his net earnings go to essential items. And then in green highlighted, he saves 1/4. So half is going to essential items, 1/4 is going to his net earnings. That means that there's only 1/4 left for purchasing anything that he desires, right? So if we look at, let's say we split this into 4, okay? So half of his income is going towards essential items. and then he's saving 1/4. Okay, that means that there's only this 1/4 left that can go towards something else that he desires. So I'm going to write this all out. So how much is that going to be? Well, it's already here for you. So 1/4 of his weekly income. So I'm just going to rewrite that down here. So his weekly income, I'm going to multiply by 1/4. So that means that he has $83.25 to spend on anything that he desires. Classify each of the following items as either increasing or decreasing purchasing power. So what is helping to increase the amount of money you have to spend on whatever you want, purchasing power, or what situations or scenarios are decreasing the amount of money you would have left over? Well, if you work overtime, then you would be increasing the amount of money that you are taking in. So therefore, you're going to have more money to spend on whatever you want. Purchasing power. You're increasing your purchasing power. Car insurance? Well, no. Car payments? An increase in pay? Yes. If you get a bonus or a pay increase, then you have more money that will increase your purchasing power. An increase in rent would decrease your purchasing power. Using a credit card would decrease your purchasing power, because when you use a credit card interest rates are so high, they're about 20%. So usually if you don't pay your credit card off right away, then you're collecting interest and you're actually paying a lot more for items that you paid with your credit card than its original cost. Receiving a credit card bill, well, you have to pay that credit card bill. So that'll decrease your purchasing power. Working a second job would increase your purchasing power. You have more money now to work with. Saving coins in a jar, that would increase your purchasing power. Smoking would decrease your purchasing power because it's very expensive to maintain such a bad habit of smoking. Ivanka is a single 28-year-old woman. Her take-home pay from her main job is about $900 every Friday. She also has income of about $100 every Friday from a second job. Calculate Ivanka's net income for a 4-week month. So remember, when we see the word take-home, that means your net income. So Ivanka gets paid $900 every 2 weeks, and there's 4 weeks in a month. So I'm going to multiply this $900 by 2. So in 1 month, she gets paid $1,800. And then her second job, it says that she gets paid $100 every week. So in a month, that's 4 weeks in a month. So that's $400. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add these together. So 1,800 plus 400 is equal to $2,200. So she takes home $2,200, $2,200 every month. Calculate Ivanka's net income for a month with 5 Fridays if the first Friday of the month is one of her paydays. So that means that she's getting paid 3 times. If the first Friday is a payday and there's 5 Fridays, that means that she's going to get paid 3 times that month. And remember, she gets paid $900 every paycheck. So now we're going to multiply by 3, which is $2,700. And then there's 5 Fridays, which means she's getting paid 5 times from her second job. And now we can add these together. Here is a list of Ivanka's usual expenses. Use the information above to determine Ivanka's total expenses for a typical month. So the first 2 are done for us. So it says rent is $734 plus $20 for parking. So that's where that $754 comes from. And then groceries is $85 per week. $85 per week. So we're going to multiply that by 4, and that's where that $340 comes from. Okay, next, car insurance is $135 a month. So we're going to add that down here, $135. Next, car expenses, $200 a month. $200 a month. Phone, $40 a month. Laundry is $10 a week. So we're going to multiply that by 4 to get the monthly expenses for laundry. So 10 times 4 is 40. Long-term savings plan, RRSPs. So $50 a week. Again, to get the monthly contribution, we're going to multiply by 4 weeks. So 50 times 4 is 200. Personal loan. She's paying back a personal loan, $238 a month. And she's paying off her credit card $100 a month. Okay, so to determine her total expenses for a month, we're just going to add all of this up. And using your calculator, you should get about $2,047. So every month, Ivanka is spending over $2,000 on essential expenses. Calculate the difference between her net income and the expenses in a typical month. So we determined up here that her net income a month is $220. So we're going to take our $220, sorry, not $220, $2,200, and we're going to subtract how much she's spending on essential expenses a month, which is $2,047. So she only has $153 left over a month. What could Ivanka do to improve her overall purchasing power in a month in which she receives 3 paychecks? So to improve or increase her purchasing power. So you want more than only $153 left over in a month, just in case you want to spend some splurge on something, or just in case something else comes up, or if you want to save more. So on those months that she receives 3 paychecks, there's a lot more room for her to save and spend in those months. Okay. And Juna is a server at a cafe in a hotel. She earns minimum wage and usually works 35 hours per week. In addition to her wages, Juna earns about $300 per week in tips. Assume that Juna works 35 hours per week. Determine her annual wages, including tips. So minimum wage currently in Ontario is $14 an hour. So I'm going to multiply that by 35 hours that she works a week, which is $490. And then on top of that, in a week, she gets $300 in tips. So that's a total of $790 a week. Now it's asking for her annual wage. So remember, that means yearly. So if we know that she is paid $790 in a week, and I know that there's 52 weeks in a year, I'm going to take my 790 and I'm going to multiply by 52 weeks in a year to determine how much she is paid in a year, which is $41,080. Approximately what percentage of her gross income does Juna take home? Well, she'll take home around 90% of her gross income. So 90% of this 41,000. So she's paid every other Thursday. Determine her net pay. Okay, so we're assuming that she's taking home 90%. Okay, so she gets paid every 2 weeks. So in 1 week, remember we've already established it up here, but I'm gonna redo it. So in 1 week, this is how much she gets paid. And I'm gonna rewrite that down the question that we're on, and then I'm gonna multiply it by 2 weeks because she gets paid every other week. So $14 times 35 hours is $490, plus her $300 a week in tips is $790. So I'm going to take that and multiply it by 2 weeks in a pay period. So in 1 pay period, she gets paid $580 gross. And I'm going to multiply it by 90% in decimal form. That's going to be this $1,422. That is her net pay. That's how much she's taking home in 1 paycheck. Assume that Juna was paid on the last day of September. Circle her October paydays. So if she got paid, so she gets paid on Thursdays. Okay, so this would be the 30th of September. So let's say this was a payday. She gets paid every other week. So that means that her next pay day would be the 14th, and then 2 weeks after that. How much should Juna expect to make in tips this month? Okay, well, if we know that she gets paid $300 a week, we're going to multiply 300 by 4 to determine how much money in a month she earns in tips. Here is a list of Juna's usual essential expenses. Use the information above to determine Juna's total expenses for a typical month. Okay, so the first one says that she puts in savings 25% of her tips. Okay, and she deposits every week. Okay, so the question here is asking us how much she's spending in a month. So I'm going to have to multiply whatever amount 25% of her weekly tips are by 4 weeks. And up here, we actually determined that Juna, she earns $1,200 a month in tips. So if we just take 25% of that, then that'll determine how much she spends or she saves in her tips a month. So $1,200 in monthly tips. Let's find out what 25% of that is. So it's $300. So she puts $300, or she spends $300 a month on savings. Okay, next, rent is $400 a month. Oh, sorry, $450. Next, groceries is $60 per week. And so I'm going to multiply it by 4 to determine her monthly expenses on groceries. So 60 times 4 is 240. Transit pass, $100 a month. Okay. Her phone is $40 a month. Okay, and then laundry is $10 a week times 4 weeks. That's $40 in laundry. And income tax, 25% of tips every week. So this is the same as up here. Okay, so this pertains to her savings. 25% of her tips go to savings, and then 25% of her tips go to income taxes. So that's $300 twice. Okay, so if you add that all up, she's spending $1,470 on essential expenses a month. So why do you think Juna puts aside 25% of her tips in a separate account for income taxes? So remember, this bottom one here says that she puts 25% of her tips, she deposits in an account every week. Well, that's because even though they're tips and they're usually in cash, that's how she receives them, she actually still needs to claim them on her income taxes. All Canadians who are working in Canada and are paying taxes, they must report all income, even if it's tips. So let's write that down. So any sort of income that you receive, you need to claim it on your income taxes. Okay, on the calendar below, place the dollar value of Jonah's gross income on the days that she receives it. So I'm going back to up here. So remember, she got paid on the 30th of September and then every second Thursday after that. So the 30th of September, which is here, and then every second Thursday after that. These are paydays. These are all paydays. Okay. Next, place the dollar value of her expenses on the day that they occur or are likely to occur. So let's go one by one up here. So savings, 25% of tips deposited every week. So $300 every week. And then she's also, just the bottom one here, 25% of tips deposited every week as well. So that's 2 payments of $300 a week that she's depositing. So I'm going to write that in blue. So I'm going to write at the end of the week, let's say a Saturday, she goes and she deposits $300 in savings and then $300 in her separate account for income taxes. And she does that every week. So every Saturday, she's going to go to the bank and deposit a total of $600, but half in one account and half in another. So I'm going to write them separately. Oops. Okay. So the first bullet and the last bullet are taken care of. Okay, rent, $400 a month, due on the first of each month. So rent is due on the first, so here, $450. Okay, next, groceries, $60 a week. So she shops once a week, spends $60. So let's say she goes on a Sunday before her work week begins. Every Sunday she goes to the grocery store, $60. Okay, next, transit pass, $100 a month, renewed between the 24th and the 30th. Okay, well, let's just write it the day before the last day of the month, just in case, something happens. She's not in a bad situation for the first of the new month. So she goes 2 days before the first of the month. Okay, and then phone, $40 a month, due on the 12th of each month. So on the 12th, she pays $40. And finally, laundry is $10 a week. So let's say that she does laundry on Sundays. She goes grocery shopping and does her laundry on Sundays. So $10 every Sunday. Okay, calculate the difference between Juna's net income and her expenses for a typical month. So I'm gonna go back for a second. So remember, this is her net income for one pay period. She gets paid every second week. So there's 4 weeks in a month, in a typical month. So I'm going to multiply her net income times 2 payments in 1 month. So that's $2,800 of monthly net income. So I'm going to take her monthly net income and I'm going to subtract how much she's spending a month on essentials, which I think we determined. Oh, right. Yes, right here. $1,470. 1,470. So she has left over $1,374, which is very good. That's a healthy amount to have left over. So remember, let's go back to someone else. So remember, Ivanka over here, she only has $153 left over every month after all of her essential expenses, whereas Juna has over $1,000. So this Juna has a healthy amount left over. Just in case there's an emergency, if you want to save, you can save faster because you have more money left over. Or if you want to splurge and buy something, then you have the money to do so. So check your understanding. This you're going to do on your own. So you can complete this independently. I've completed it, just gave some examples, but I would highly recommend that you complete this chart independently now that you've today's lesson is fresh in your mind, and you can always message me if you have any questions.